Hi, friends. This is Wendy Harrop, and welcome to the Say Yes to Yourself podcast. On the Say Yes to Yourself podcast, you'll hear stories from women just like us who are adding the practice of saying yes in their daily lives in big and small ways, and as a result, are experiencing the truth that everybody wins when you say yes to yourself. Saying yes to yourself is a graceful unfolding, an intentional becoming of the very best version of you. It is my hope that in these conversations, we are able to find our truth and be inspired and empowered to live our very best lives. I'm so excited to go on this journey with you, and I look forward to finding a bit of our own story in each other's.
I have to say, recording this introduction has been interesting. I am putting it off. See, I can't even get the words out of my mouth. I want to be careful. It's a super sensitive time. I want you to feel seen and heard and acknowledged and considered. I want to feel seen and heard and acknowledged and considered. And I understand that some people listening feel super elated about last week and the results of the election. And some people feel disempowered. Some people feel sad. Some people feel afraid. I am having trouble identifying how I feel. I think because I'm pissed, actually. And that was not a tolerated emotion growing up. And I wasn't mad about that either. Obviously, not a tolerated emotion. So you can't even be mad about not being allowed to be mad. So, what I do when I feel like I don't know, or I'm not in my typical state of joy and delight and dreamy goodness, I think about what I do know. And what I do know is that the last 4 years of my life have been extraordinary. They have ushered in an era of expansion and growth and decisions and freedom and choice and complete transformation. And I also know that none of those things were because of who was living on Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. They were because I made a decision, because I chose me, because I said yes to myself, and I chose a new life. I chose a new way of thinking, which changed the way I acted every day. Those thoughts changed my beliefs, which informed my actions, which changed my life. I was in charge of that. And I hope that that reminder of you also being in charge of your day and your life and your trajectory and all of your yeses and all of your nos is empowering. I hope that you are finding delight in something today, because I'm telling you, Queens, how we feel is everything. And you are not denying that it feels like the world's going to hell in a handbasket. If you get pleasure from petting your dog, if you get pleasure from petting your dog, you should pet your dog. If you get pleasure from being outside, you should be outside. If you get pleasure by having potato chips and a gin and tonic for dinner, then that's what you should do. These little, not even little, these intentional decisions to do what brings you joy is what will prepare you for what's next for you. What's next for you individually, what's next for us collectively, and what are the tenets that inform your next yes. Okay, I did it. I said some of the things. I highly value and treasure the responsibility of having a microphone, of having a platform, and of being authentic. And I completely understand that me sharing my political views, my views on you choosing yourself, my views on where to use your voice and when to get louder might be offensive to some people. And if they are, then I lovingly release you to find joy and delight in other places. But I am making a decision for myself to no longer be quiet or small because I think it's going to make somebody else more comfortable. My experience matters. My experience matters. Now, I'm going to tell you something else. I have been delighted to have these conversations on this podcast with amazing, phenomenal women that are saying yes in big and small ways. I have such a beautiful influx of these interviews. My calendar is full on recording days, expansive conversations, gorgeous conversations that are massive in numbers. And I recorded this particular conversation many, many weeks ago. And I just think it's ironic that my guest today has such a wonderful mission that talks about communicating your brand story and using your voice as a company, as an organization. And it was in reflecting on her bio that gave me the extra little nudge of courage to authentically use my voice to communicate my brand, where I'm going as a human, and where this empire is going with me. So today's guest is Becky Freemal. She is an author, speaker, Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist turned fractional chief marketing officer, and founder of The Market Exec. She brings together the power of storytelling with the need for data-driven results into bold, innovative marketing strategies. She has a strong sense of purpose and has seen firsthand that when businesses find their purpose, it exposes their passion, their stories, and connects them to the very people they are meant to impact. In her new book, she is written from the perspective of a seasoned marketing strategist and fractional executive. Brand Voice shows you how to understand who you are as an organization and how you want to show up in the world. Do that, and your marketing strategy will sing and tactics will fall into place. Well, Miss Becky Freemal. I have taken your advice and I have decided how I want to show up in the world. And my sweet listener, I invite you to enjoy this conversation with Becky as she shares the ways that we can all use our voice in effective, empowering ways, no matter what we're communicating.
Fun Becky, I've renamed you. You are now Fun Becky. I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you so much in advance. I'm really eager to have this conversation.
Thank you for having me. And I had so much fun listening to some of your previous podcasts. I just listened to the one from Betsy, I forget her last name, but I so related to her. She talked about how she grew up in Catholic school. I'm like, oh, girl, preach. I was 12 years with the nuns before I moved on to college. And I just resonate. A lot of things that she said resonated with me.
Thank you. I tell my listeners all the time, this is the easiest, most fun thing of all the fun and fabulous things I do. It's my favorite, and I love it so much. I probably maybe 3.5 years ago now, I created a personal mantra on accident that I am only available for what delights me. And thank you. It has been completely life-changing for me. And it also makes a very full day, but it's full of all fun and fabulous things.
Okay, we're going to have to completely circle back to that at some point because I know it's such a beautiful mantra and I love it, but how do you live it? Like saying
I'm
it.
happy to tell you.
Yes, I want to know how you actually did the thing. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yes. So when I first uttered it out loud at the prompt of a podcast I was listening to while shoveling snow, and I said, well, and she started the prompt with, I am only available for, and we were supposed to finish it as the listener of the podcast. And I just uttered for what delights me. And then I laughed out loud because I thought, oh, well, who do I think I am? Is that even a thing? And then as I started practicing saying that to other people, they all made the same beautiful face that you made when I said it and asked me, oh, can we do that? Is that allowed? And I became more and more empowered every time I said it. And then people started asking, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? So, and I think that's what your question is how do I live that out? So I use that mantra as my filter for everything that I let in, which was also very convenient post-pandemic. As I let things back in, they had to go through that filter, and some things didn't make it, including my now ex-husband, but he is fabulous and doing what delights him now. And if there is a chore or a task that I need to attend to, I do live on a small flower farm. I used to raise chickens. So if I needed to clean the chicken coop or do the weeding, that in itself does not delight me. But being a flower farmer does. Raising chickens does. Having a podcast does. So any of the tasks that I have to do that I might not enjoy on their own, they are a part of a bigger entity that does delight me. And so I can balance that. And within that, if the task that's not enough, then I know that that's something that I need to outsource. Because if I was in charge of producing this podcast, even though I love it, it would never happen because that is not a task that delights me, nor do I want to learn how to do it. So I have an amazing podcast editor and producer, and I get to do what I enjoy, and she gets to do what she enjoys.
say no to something so you can say yes to more.
That is absolutely right. Yes. So that is how I live that out. And I am very excited to hear how you are saying yes to yourself in this season.
Oh my goodness. So, we were talking about that and I was like, gosh, there's so many yeses in a way, and good and bad. I mean, not all yeses necessarily are positive. I mean, the AI models, when it says a yes, will tell you that it is a positive tone in the email or whatever. But sometimes yes is not positive. But I'm going to go with the positive ones, which is about a year ago. This is so funny, Wendy. So I started my LLC because I wanted to go out on my own. And, I'm a fractional chief marketing officer, author, speaker, all the things, but I was none of those things prior to my entrepreneurial journey. And I worked W-2 my whole life. I always worked for a company. And I grew up in a family that both my parents were Catholic high school teachers in Cincinnati, and my sister works for a law firm. I mean, everyone works for someone. And so for me to break out of that mold and say, I'm, going rogue and I'm going to do my thing, wasn't even like anyone told me I couldn't. They were all very empowering, but it was me that was telling myself no. Like, what if it doesn't work? What if you can't provide for your children? What happens if you can't pay the mortgage? They got to eat. Before you knew it, my babies were starving and we had no home in my brain.
Right.
We do very well with that. So I was driving to work one day and I was listening to NPR, and you click on the radio at the last second, you don't really hear everything. And I heard the reporter ask the interviewee, wow, you grew up in a family that owned a hospice care for 31 years. She goes, that must have been a morbid dinner conversation. So I had no idea what the context for it was. Nothing. That's where I picked up the conversation. And it was meant to be. I heard the woman say, actually, it was quite the opposite. She said, when you work with people in their final moments of life, their clarity is unbelievable and unmatched. Mm-hmm. And she said, the number one piece of advice I got was from the people who did not take the risk, they regretted it. And from the people who did the thing they wanted to try, they were able to pass a little more peacefully. And so kind of do the thing is what she was saying. And I was like driving down the road and I kind of looked out the windshield. I don't know if it's looking at the stars aligning, the universe, God, I don't know. But most people tell you I was crazy and just talking to myself, because that part was true. And I just yelled out, I go, okay, I heard you. Like, leave me alone already. And at that point I had my LLC, but it was sitting there doing nothing. So I decided, it wasn't like, wasn't that day, but I did move on about a month or two later as a fractional chief marketing officer. And I don't know that I have stopped smiling since. It has been so wonderful to say yes to me. And it is scary. I tell people, this is kind of my pitch for my own journey is I was beyond excited. I was super energized, and I had a healthy dose of holy shit mixed in.
Totally.
That's still the case.
Oh my goodness. I love that story. My face is sore from smiling. I love that. And I talk to myself and say what I'm available for while shoveling snow. So I'm all about the out loud internal conversations. And it's so interesting that you mentioned that from this hospice care person. There's a book called either the 7 or the 5 Regrets of the Dying, and it's by Bonnie Ware. And she talks about that the unlived life is the number one regret of the dying. And I love that you were available to hear that message that, quote unquote, coincidentally, which I just believe these things are happening all the time. We're just not paying attention. And when we pay attention is when we think there are coincidences. Mm-hmm. It's just so beautiful, such a gorgeous synchronicity. And that you were also had already laid the groundwork for it. So something in your future self whispering to who you were when you started your LLC about something is coming, Queen, and we want you to be ready. And I think it's so beautiful and expansive and fun and exactly the conversations I love to have.
Well, and think about too, like, I think, when you said, I happen to have the LLC or have that in place, I think it also goes to say about how when you hear a message and the different times you're hearing it and who's telling you, because I had the LLC put together because I had a wonderful friend in the fractional space who had been not really pounding it in, but just nicely nudging and saying, Becky, you really should do it. You were a journalist for all these years. You're really good at that, like pivot and move and change between different strategies and different companies. You've got your MBA. You've been out of news for a while. You've got that marketing under your belt. Now is the time. And I was like, so I heard the message, but I don't know if I really received it. But I heard it enough to start doing the thing and building the LLC and such a dork because I am a marketer, but it's like truly the omni market, the omni channel approach. You need to hear it at different levels from different times, and eventually just boop, the stars align. And that, I think, is what happened that day.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And I love this. We interviewed a few weeks ago a fractional CFO.
Mm-hmm.
So like we just need a few more interviewees and we can put together a whole
business
match made in heaven business, one-stop shop. Everyone can open their doors. And I love the idea. I don't know, I'm sure it's been around for many years. I just feel like it's either been rebranded by someone smart, calling it fractional. I've just started hearing that more often. And it's really such a beautiful model for someone who has this corporate experience and an entrepreneurial spirit, because you get to have the change and the energy shifts of working with these different companies, but you're bringing a piece that is structural and isn't as visionary, but it gets the visionary's message out to the masses, and that requires some structure and a process that so well.
What it really is, for any fractional CFO, CMO like myself, a COO, it's that strategy piece that for so many years people thought, oh, if I work with an external team member, then they are a doer. They are a tactical person who will build the website, or they're the tactical person who will do our graphic design or bookkeeping if it's finances. But that fractional space really opens up the opportunity to bring in that strategy piece that a lot of those small to mid-sized companies especially were like, oh, we don't have the resources for a full-time C-suite. We don't have the money, and I don't know if we can afford the heaviness of it. So then they kind of go without, and have been going without, or they might hire a consultant who might come in and tell them a little bit of what to do and how to do the thing. And there's a time and a place, absolutely, consultants are needed. But the fractional space allows a CMO to come in and you really embed yourself. You are their chief marketing officer. You embed yourself with their team. You might say, hey, we need a consultant for X, Y, or Z. If you decide to do that, you hire a team together for the tacticians. Like, we need a website built. Let's get a web developer. We need this. But it's so fun when I find clients who are really ready to take that next step, and you tell them what you do, and they're like, oh, you can just see the stress relief, because they're probably the CEO or founder. They've been doing the thing themselves for so long, but they're long past the startup stage, and they're like, wow, we're doing so much. And so it's really exciting. And I have a little bit of problem, which is, we all are over assessed in this world. Our DISC assessment, strengths finders, Myers-Briggs, I've had them all. I'm an open book. But the thing that drives me is altruism, is what comes up in all of these. And so that's my pain point. Wendy, someone will be like, I need a thing. And I'm like, okay, let me help you. And now that I'm an entrepreneur, I'm like, well, I'm still going to help you, and I'll give free advice, but I actually need to get paid for my services. So I need to find myself a salesperson, because I'll tell you what, but I don't know what it is. Sales is not a bad thing, but I just always feel when I'm doing it. Isn't that crazy?
Oh, it's not crazy at all. And I really appreciate you sharing, because I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. I think so often, it is the entrepreneurial journny. We know my box does not have a lid. So I am really not available for a job. And I have so many of them.
that I've created for myself, right? So the entrepreneur in me is all about the vision, all about the desired impact, all about the service, all about the, oh my gosh, I get to do this. Like this gets to be my job. Oh my, this is amazing. And then just like you said, it comes to, oh, but now I need to assign a value to that. And then I need to tell a prospective client. And then I need to stay on my own side of the street about whatever they do with that information. And it can be, I don't know if it's more prevalent in women or men. It feels like it's more prevalent in women.
Yeah.
I feel like a part of my resistance or the barriers that I come up against is so much of what I do is in the hospitality space. I own a bed and breakfast on this small farm, and I lead the trips to France for solo female travelers. And I was a wedding planner for 30 years. So this bringing vendors together, bringing events together that are centered around food and conversation, it's also the job of a wife. And there's not, when I was a wife, I just associated with this is just me doing that job. And I was very underpaid for that job. So now that I need those same things that have prepared me to do my job well, to be paid for those, that's one hurdle. The second hurdle that I would love your insight on, thank you so much, I'll pay you for your time, is getting paid to do something that I love. Right? Because like, oh, well, if you are working for someone else, there's some element that you don't like about your job, but that's okay. Nobody else likes their job either. And it has to be hard and all of these things that I don't believe anymore.
Yes.
But there's still this, there can still be this speed bump about getting paid. And I get no one's going to value my service until I do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I come up against my growth edges all the time.
So so remind me, because I'm going to squirrel out here for just a second. You're gonna be like, Becky, come on, reel it back in,
No,
girl.
I'm here all day, Queen.
I've done a lot of soul searching on this. And so I will tell you, people will say, well, what, okay, you're driven by altruism. Money's not your driver, but we all need to make money to make the world go round. That's capitalism. And that is where we are. And I'm like, you're right. Fact filled. I'm all about it. Let's go. But what is the issue? And I really have soul searched, and I worked for 24 years in broadcast news. And in that growing up period of my career life, me or my fellow colleagues heard from probably every news director. I'm sure there's one or two that were cool, but lots of news directors who would say to me or them, you know what, for every one of you, we've got 100 resume tapes in there of somebody who will take your spot. You aren't anything special. Shut up to go do your job. Overall newsroom management is kind of an example of what not to do in a lot of cases. And so when you found a news director who was actually empowering of you, you almost didn't know what to do with it. You're like, oh my gosh, you're so nice. But I lived for 24 years in that space. I lived knowing, so I thought, that I wasn't really worth it, that I could be replaced at any time, and that my colleagues could be replaced at any time, that we weren't anything special. That was kind of that was very much the message. So then I guess I carried that as I left broadcast news, but it didn't really come back to haunt me until I went out on my own. And I would try and sell my wares, so to speak. And I would have people who were so interested and then be like, well, how much? Oh my gosh. I told one person one time, I'm like, oh, I'm going to do X amount. Well, I'll do it less for you. And I'm like, before they even said anything, out my mouth it came. And I'm like, Becky, what? Girl, you've got to get better at this. So I've really leaned into my sales. And I will tell you one thing that really helps me, and it's only because I truly believe it. I can't lie to myself. I know when I'm doing it. And I think people know when you're lying to them. So I had to feel it in my innermost soul. And it is that I do have a wealth of knowledge from all my years in broadcast, my MBA, my communication jobs, my marketing jobs, and how horrible and selfish and arrogant of me to keep that inside and not share it with somebody. And at the end of the day, yes, they're paying me, but that's how the world works. You've got a mortgage. The mortgage company isn't going to say, oh, that's okay. You help somebody with their business. You don't have to pay this month. I mean, that's just the way it works. And so it really helped me with my sales pitches, because they stopped feeling like sales and they just started feeling like I was genuinely here to support and help them. And if they thought it was the right fit, great. And if not, no big deal, because there are plenty of businesses out there that do need the help. So I don't know. Hopefully that helps somebody. Don't keep it in your head.
Right. No, it's so true. And when we understand that it's all an energy exchange, and the thing that helped me, because I charge for my things, and you actually can't tell your mortgage company, oh, but I really love the podcast. They don't care. That does not pay the bills. But when I was collaborating with other vendors and they were telling me how much it costs to go make lunch in their beautiful Parisian apartment, then that helped me cross that bridge. But also because I was so excited to have that experience and to offer that experience to my clients, that was a balanced exchange of energy. We were the vibrational match of what she was charging and what I felt we were getting for that. It was a match. And
Awesome.
that is what feels so good. And I think, actually, this is coming to me right now. So get your pens, listeners. I think what makes sales feel yucky is when we are undervaluing ourselves, and that's not a vibrational match. And that's what feels yucky. It's not that we're charging too much. It's not that, oh, we're asking someone for money. Now they're going to think we're greedy. It's none of that.
Right.
It's because it's not an equal exchange. And it's awkward when you are with another person and they are just over giving,
Yes.
that it just starts to feel obscene. Like if someone just walked up to you and said, hi, my name's Sue, and I'd love to give you a ride to the airport, and I've made a lasagna, here you go. And do you like cookies? Oh, you have an allergy? Okay, well, I've got these cookies over here. It would just be like, oh my gosh, Sue. Like
Easy.
this doesn't feel good to me to receive all of your overgiving. And so thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you for that. That's such a beautiful reminder to me that it is just energy, and we want to exchange at an equal level because it feels good for everybody.
I think it's funny when we're talking about this. So in marketing, you have your inbound and your outbound marketing channels, and depending on your client, you need a good mix of everything. Some might need more of one or the other, but I realized for me in my own personal marketing for Becky Freemal that I'm a better inbound marketer for me. And that's just felt less yucky, because outbound is more like the pushing yourself out there and jumping in front of someone with the billboard and being like, hey, I'm over there. And so that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, which we will talk about that eventually. But I wrote that book, Brand Voice, because at first I thought, I need to get the information I know. I need to tell people, look, you don't have to hire me at a book level. You can read the book and implement it for smaller, cost and less time. If you're a larger company and you actually need someone to implement it for you, it'll be much better. And I realized when I started doing things that brought people into me, opposed to me having to jump out at them, then I felt like I was really helping out. And, when you talk about like inbound marketing, here's a great example. When I was in news, I did a series, a 4-part series that highlighted kitchens at different restaurants around town. And I remember, and part of the gig was, if you said yes and you let us into your kitchen, the head chef had to give us the recipe. And I remember saying to the chef, why are you so willing to give up this recipe that people have to pay for? And and he was at a better, more confident place than I was when I first started. I'm almost there now, pretty much there. He said, well, because no one can do it as good as I can.
Love it.
And I tell you, Wendy, first of all, spot on just in that very moment. Cause I went back to make one of the recipes and I'm like, oh my God, this does not taste at all like the one they made for me when I did the story. And same, the book absolutely meant to help people. It's not just, oh, hey, you're going to find out you can't do it as well as me. I mean, it is really meant to help people, but there are going to be organizations who are ready to go to that next level. And I can absolutely do that. And so it's nice to have a book because you have an offering from the smallest to the largest of clients. And then it also makes me feel less guilty. And that's all selfish and all about me, but it makes me feel better knowing I'm still giving away some free advice because I just feel.
Exactly. That's how I feel about the podcast.
Yes.
I have coaching programs and people can be in this energy and be the recipient of my 3,000 ideas that I have for them. And I can hold space for them to take inspired action, all of those good things. And if they don't wish to join that program, they have a free podcast.
Exactly.
So it feels so good. And I love that what you mentioned about the chef, because it's totally true.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any secret recipes? I don't think so. Like we've been here a long time and we've been making food a long time. I don't know how secret this is, but the unique factor is the chef, is the person in the kitchen. And there will always be people that change their own oil and always be people that take their car to the dealer. So you can write a book about how to change your oil, and then there's still going to be someone that says, well, can you just do it for me?
Right.
Because it would just feel better if you did it for me.
Right. Right. And you have both. Or, hey, I am running a mile a minute. Can I do it? Sure. But I don't have the bandwidth. And that is why I need someone who's an expert at it. 100%. So I actually have an anecdote in my book that I love, and I just wanted to tell you, and I have to share it with the listeners. It's wonderful. And I'm sure some of these people will say, oh, I've already heard it. But it's a lot of people will not have. And it's about the experience. And when you triggered the thought, when you said, the chef is that missing element, the chef is the one that really just makes it. And it was about a Chicago printing press. And again, this is just like a little, analogy kind of fun story. And I don't know, the machine wouldn't work. The printing press wasn't working. It was a Chicago newspaper, and the big Christmas Day, Sunday morning paper was coming out. And they were like, oh my gosh, we're going to lose, however much money a Chicago newspaper will lose on a Sunday morning, which is, I'm sure, probably in the millions. All our advertising won't happen. We can't print the paper. What are we going to do? So there was a man who had been retired, and they reached out and they said, hey, will you come in and fix the printing press? So they called him at like midnight or something. He comes in out of his retirement, looks around, takes a coin out of his pocket, puts it into a screw, changes it, turns it about a quarter of a turn, and then it starts working. And they're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. We couldn't have done it without you. They're going to, save the day, blah, blah, blah. He goes back, he sends the invoice, and they get the invoice, and it says $10,000. And the folks are like, at the printing press and at the newspaper. So what the heck is $10,000 for? You're going to need to send us an itemized list of what everything was. And so he put years of experience, $9,999, turning the screw $1. And then it was 10. And I was like, I love that story because the experience is what makes it. It's just lived experiences and understanding the nuances. And sometimes the nuances are what everything rests on. And you just don't have that experience early on. But the people who are early in their career also have a lot of experience in other ways. That's why it takes a team. And it's so important to have that chief marketing officer and then have people that came right out of college and have this particular expertise. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a huge believer in team. It's everything.
It's so beautiful. I love that story. And I love that it's true for everybody. What everyone is bringing is a priceless contribution. And I think this mindset and messaging, like you experienced in your days in news, it's so antiquated and nobody actually believes it, but it keeps being repeated because as long as we can say this is how it is, it makes it a lot easier for all of us and we don't have to change anything, and compliance is really good for the bottom line. But if you asked each individual person, they would say,
No, of course. Like, yes, everyone has this unique ability and this unique contribution, but we are surrounded by voices that say that's not true. And until we believe that for ourselves, we're just swimming in this stream that we don't even want to be in.
You just said bottom line, and that again, I was like, ding, a little light bulb went off. That is such a big part of what I bring to the table when it comes to marketing. I hear so many people in business talk about the bottom line. And when I first got out of journalism and moved more into the corporate space, I mean, heck, everyone talks about bottom line, but I realized they were talking about bottom line when it came to trend lines and forecast models and data. And I'm like, okay. And I would say, I'm a storyteller, you know, I'm a journalist. And they'd be like, and I got this very strong sense of, oh, that's cute. You know, how sweet. She's a storyteller. And I thought, okay, well, they've been in the corporate world for a really long time. Maybe they've got something. So, I mean, I leaned into it. I got my MBA. I learned about all the data analysis. I learned R squared and how you need to get as close to one as possible and blah, 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 all the things. And when I came out the other end, I realized stronger than ever how important storytelling was. That was when it really hit me. And I thought, okay, now I understand. Now I've got a good grasp of all the things, the full picture. Now I realize a lot of these people, when they're like, oh, you're a storyteller, I'm like, you're missing the mark. And if you don't know how to tell a story, you are not going to drive revenue. Because if you think about, I'm going to be really dorky now, the hierarchy, you know, of effects, HOE, as we called it in our class. But the high level concept of the hierarchy of effects is that people think, they feel, and then they do. And consistent across the board all the time. Think, feel, do. Just think that mantra. Think, feel, do. Well, look at that, dissect it a little bit. Right before the do, before the action, is the feel. Well, how do you get those emotions? How do you get those feelings? They're storytelling. And when you connect with the people, that is when the action takes place, which then drives your bottom line. That bottom line is not moving by itself. Those data points and numbers don't move on their own. They move because of the action of a human being who made the decision. And that human being made that decision because of a connection that made them, that prompted them to do the thing. And I just, as a marketer, I think even in the marketing world, I run into quite a few people who maybe are really excited about all the technology and the AI and all the data, and everything is so important, every aspect of that. But I realized coming into this space from the broadcast journalism side, that brand voice and that storytelling, that evidence-based storytelling is getting left behind. And it's such an important strategy piece. And I've heard from people now that the book came out, which is called Brand Voice, how it has paralleled. And I have a friend who sent me pictures. She like hand wrote notes and did all the things about how it paralleled in your own personal brand and how you show up in the world. And that it's not just the proactive and how you go out and do something. But if something hits you and you fall to the ground and you feel like it's a failure, it's really how you react. That's your brand. Like, how do you react to the adversity of life? How do you react to the wonderful things of life? They don't always have to be bad. I like fun. Let's stick with fun. But yeah, I think that it's a really important aspect for people to remember that, at least when you're talking about storytelling, how those emotions and how those connections and feelings, that's what drives people to act, period, really. But people don't necessarily notice that.
I could not agree more. I feel like it's so much a part of the entrepreneurial journey is a story. It is the heroine's journey of how I was in this situation and I faced a problem, and then a guide came, and then I slayed the dragon, and then this is the lesson I learned, and this is it. And there's so much to, for me, the personal connection, the inviting people into my narrative as they interact with my business, but also injecting myself into other people's narratives as I interact with their business. We mentioned the trips to France, and I collaborate with these beautiful women that have said yes to themselves and have relocated to France, mostly from the US, and are living out their dream. So sure, we could take a class at Le Cordon Bleu, and that would be amazing. And we get the little embroidered apron and all the things. And
that person has a story and those are all good, but they're a part of a bigger machine.
Yes.
Compared to being in Veronique's kitchen and hearing how she went to Cordon Bleu, but she also loved cooking with her grandmother, and she wanted to pair these beautiful technique that she learned with the feeling that she had as a child. And so she creates these beautiful market tours, and then you go to her kitchen in her beautiful apartment in Paris, and you make this gorgeous multi-course lunch, and we're drinking champagne, and then we sit at the table and she's with us and we're all pinching ourselves, and it is the most magical experience. And you could say, oh yeah, I do cooking classes and lunch is included, but that it's so much more than that. And
Yeah.
I love story, and I love living story and telling stories. And you're absolutely right. It's how we remember that we're all connected.
Oh, I guarantee the people who had that, like you were saying from her, and I give cooking classes and I sell lunch. There are people who might just do cooking classes, or even better, let's just talk about the people on your tour who have gone and bought lunch at a wonderful restaurant. But think about it down the line, and I'm like, oh, do you remember that restaurant? It was so good. I'd love to go again, but that's about it. They will never forget that experience because she brought in her own story of her childhood in the sense that reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen, or whatever it is. And now it's going to be passed on. Like these people, the people that you bring, these wonderful women who I want to be a part of, by the way.
I want you to. I mean, I have chills right now. And I love that that's the beauty of story, is that we can relive the experience as we retell the story. And
Yes.
it happens both ways. I mean, it happens when we have an unfortunate experience and then we talk about it and we get that tightness in our chest and we have to remind ourselves, it's okay, honey, it's not happening right now. Like, I'm just retelling the story. But why? Why would I do that when I would rather tell this yummy story that gives me chills, which I have to tell you, at the time of this recording, I'm so excited that I will be in her kitchen in 3 weeks having that very experience. And I would be so sad if I wasn't. So
Right. Oh my God, that just sounds so amazing. It's just, it's experiences. And, I just spoke to a woman not too long ago who said that, and when I say not too long ago, like literally earlier today, in my entrepreneurial world, we do a lot of collaborations, and she's a data analyst and understands the importance of story. And I'm the storyteller and the brander and the chief marketing officer. And so we're looking at collaborations, but back to story, I always kind of ask a little bit about them. And she's in Panama City, Panama with her 14-year-old daughter. They decided to get rid of all their belongings except for what fit in 3 suitcases. They moved from New York City, where she was in the rat race, to now currently in Panama, but she'd been in some other really cool South American cities, and starting her entrepreneurial journey. I mean, talk about someone saying yes to herself.
I know. I want to have her on the podcast, please.
I will totally connect you guys.
Thank you.
Because she's amazing. And it all came from adversity. She shared that she used to live in New York City, and right during COVID, she had been diagnosed with breast cancer. So they stopped all treatment so they could clear hospital beds for COVID. And she had to do something. And that was what initially moved her out of New York City to move on to what has eventually become cancer-free in Panama, not living out of, but living with only 3 suitcases worth of things, because it's discovered it's not the material things, but what the experiences are. And it just sounds so cool. She's like, it's just me and my 14-year-old daughter. And she didn't say this, but I'm like, it's like you and your 14-year-old daughter against the world. And I love it. Like, and they're not against the world, they're with the world, but what I mean? They are experiencing the world together, and they are like tied tightly together. But yeah, I mean, and that just came from a collaboration of a third party, so to speak, who connected us and said, hey, work-wise, I think you guys could really find some collaborations. And then in the midst of it, we got to talking, and I'm like, I love this woman. She's so cool. And it just, I mean, am I going to do that tomorrow? Probably not. But what a good reminder that it's not always about the money or the material things. It's about the experiences. And it goes back to the NPR interview. At the end of the day, what's most important? And again, she said the people with the most clarity in those final moments of life, which you would think would be such a sad time, and I'm sure is in one realm, but brings such clarity in the other. And it was always, I wish I would have done the thing, or I'm so glad I did do the thing. I just love that.
It's so good. I'm excited, and please connect us, because it's the thing that I'm so enjoying about this podcast. I'm not kidding. 98% of the women that I meet, wherever I am, in 5 minutes of conversation, I'm inviting them to be on the podcast, because I'm so loving how they're saying yes to themselves. And it's so beautiful that I love that there are big ways and there are small ways. And I have found that sharing those stories on this platform is helping women say yes to themselves more often, to be reminded of what's available for them. Like, thank you, Marvell, for going to France for a month or 3 months. She goes for 3 months, because that shows other people what's available for them. And I've done over 150 episodes. I'm at no loss of guests for this podcast, because women are saying yes to themselves, and it is so beautiful. And we are normalizing that everybody wins when you do that. We are normalizing that there is no prize for being the only one who does it all.
Right. Haven't found it yet, at least.
No, it's not at the end of that to-do list either, for sure. But it's having a life well lived, right? That you can look back, of course, at the end on a life well lived, but let's look back on this day.
Let's enjoy the
life well lived.
Yes.
Right?
100%.
Thank you for writing this book.
Yes.
How was that process for you? And what do you hope the reader walks away with?
I think the most important thing I want people to walk away from this book is understanding that you can be genuine to who you are as an organization, or even who you are as a person. Because again, I wrote it kind of business to business, if you will, but there's so many parallels in the personal branding. But that when you are genuine to yourself, it is felt, it is noticed, and then that trust is built. And that is how you make true connections with people. And again, people are what drive the bottom line. So if you're an organization, that's where you start to care about that stuff. You got to build that trust. And I just want people to walk away and understand the other thing I talk about building a genuine, simple, and consistent brand voice. Simple does not mean dumb. Simple, the most intelligent human beings out there know their information. They just know their stuff so well inside and out that they can simplify it and anyone can understand it. As soon as you hear someone talking in 52 syllable words and talking over your head, or I don't know, the show, have you ever watched Schitt's Creek?
No.
So full disclosure, neither have I, but there's a scene, love it. And I've watched it a million times, and I even brought it into my book about one character, Maura or whatever, talking to David, and she's like, you need to fold in the cheese. And he's like, how do you fold in the cheese? She's like, just fold in the cheese. And they're in the kitchen, he's stirring. And he gets aggravated. He's like, what does that mean? Like, how do I fold cheese? And she's like, David, I don't know how else to tell you. You just need to fold the cheese. He's like, do I take the little pieces of shredded cheese and bend them? Like, what are you talking about? And the point is, she didn't know her information. She didn't know what folding in the cheese meant. And that's why she just kept saying the word again and again. So when you talk about simplifying a message, it's just connecting with people with information. Like, if you know your stuff inside and out, you don't have to talk at a level that the other person doesn't get. And every time I see that episode, it just makes me laugh, or that clip, because someone told me about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, that is why you need to be simplistic. You could have an attorney and a doctor talking to each other. One would argue that those two women are beyond educated and are really smart, but they don't know each other's lingo. So if you start talking lingo, legal or medical, they're going to be like, huh? So just speak in simple terms so everyone can get it. And then to be consistent, because if you say black one time and white the next, you're going to break trust in a heartbeat. People are like, well, which one are you? You know, you said purple yesterday and yellow today. Like, what? I don't understand. So that's what I just want people to understand, the importance of being genuine and being real. And you don't ever get caught in a situation that you're like, well, I don't know. I really didn't know. I said it because I thought my boss wanted me to say it, or whatever it is. And the other thing I want people to take away from it isn't necessarily written in there, but it's my takeaway from the experience is that I can do it. Like, I was starting my own business. I have 2 boys in travel soccer running around like crazy. My husband, I mean, it's busy here. And I found time to say yes to myself in that regard and write that book while I said yes to myself about starting my own business. And do you know what I didn't think about, Wendy? And I loved it when I was writing. And I think, again, for me, it was because I have ADHD and my brain's all over. And I had a book coach who helped me brain dump. Like, here's the organizational part of it. Because a book seems like such a heavy lift, and it's not like a paper or a social media post or anything, email. And as soon as she did it, it like opened the gates. As soon as she helped, she just, and I do that for people. So it's just nice to have someone to do it for me, like extract it from me. And it felt so good to be so focused and undistracted for such long periods of time. Like, when I got into my writing mode, I got so excited about helping somebody. I got so excited about someone might actually get this and like work magic with it when I get it in their hands. And then selfishly, I just felt good that I was so focused and just undistracted, because life is distracting. I'd also argue, I think just about everyone in the world has ADHD. I mean, it's just, life is so nutty right now. And so being able to find something that really holds your focus when you find it, whether it's writing a book or something, cherish that moment.
Beautiful, beautiful takeaways. I love how what you wanted people to go away with requires them to really center in and know themselves, so that everything that comes out of their mouth is truth for them, instead of trying to figure out what someone else wants you to say or wants to hear. And you also experienced a bit of that process in the writing of it. Like, you found space for yourself, you held space for yourself, and you were present enough and aware to know you were having a really beautiful experience. And back to the vibrational match, like the energy that you put in, because it was enjoyable, because it was life-giving, because it was in service, the reader has to have that same experience, because that's just how those laws work. You reap what you sow. So what you put into it is what the reader will feel when they are in touch with the words and the ideas and the concepts and principles that you've laid out. It's really such a gift.
Yeah, and I hope it's like I said, it's just simplicity, and that's the point of the book. I simplify it. Again, there are big corporations and even people who might hire a fractional CMO. We'll make it a little more complicated because we're experts in it. We're going to bring in the data analysts and everyone, but there's no reason even smaller organizations or nonprofits that are just beginning, for example, can't take that as almost a how-to guide and motivate them. I tell a lot of stories. I talk about my son's adoption, and I talk, all the stories in there are about real life and experiences I've had, and how the data informed it and the outcome. And so, yeah, we've been talking way too long, but there's a lot.
I love it. That's so generous of you to add your personal stories. And I mean, that's what good marketing does, right? You bring in story and you simplify message, and you use concepts that are well known and well received. So you don't have to start from scratch every time you talk about a new business. When I was first looking to move from California to Massachusetts, I wanted a bed and breakfast. And my husband at the time, as it got closer, wanted not a bed and breakfast. So this is the only property that we looked at that was not a B&B. And when I saw it, I thought, oh, okay, if I need to course correct from that dream, pivot a bit, this is a place I could do it, because it's really beautiful. It spoke to me. Properties find me. So I was listening. I heeded the call of the Phineas Wright House. And as soon as he decided that this was not for him, I turned it into a bed and breakfast. So like, all of that is good. Now, this bed and breakfast, it's only 2 rooms. It's not like the properties I was looking at before. And that's not a solid business model. Like you can't retire to Bali by having a 2-room bed and breakfast with a shared bathroom in a 240-year-old house in New England, right? So what it did though is it definitely met a need in my heart, but it significantly shortened my bio because I was doing all the things that this property wants me to do. It wants me to sell and arrange flowers. It wants me to make bourbon poached peaches from my peach trees and make blueberry gin smash cocktails out of my blueberries. It has all of these things, and I have a barn, and you can do floral design workshop, and you can, if you're a photographer, you can come here, and oh, I do cooking classes, and oh yeah, I go to France. Like I did all of these things that it took me an hour to tell somebody what I did, because like you were saying, like I just kept talking because I was like remembering, oh yeah, I do that too. But now I can say I own a historic bed and breakfast on a small New England flower farm.
There you go.
And people have enough of a mental picture of a bed and breakfast, enough of a mental picture about New England. They have enough of a mental picture about a flower farm that whatever beautiful thing that pops in their head when I say those words is all in favor of my brand. And all what you'll get when you come here, whether it looks like the picture in your head or not, it made my message so much easier to communicate, or at least to evoke curiosity in the person I was talking to, instead of overwhelm and fatigue like my prior conversations did.
Well, and when you're talking about that, the other thing that I think is so important about brands is I think sometimes brand, just the word brand alone, people like give it the bad rap, kind of like sales gets a bad rap, and oh, it's kind of yucky in a brand. Brand is actually a very good thing if you make it genuine, simple, and consistent. And you should not, from an organizational standpoint, or when you were just talking about your line that you've got it distilled down, brands are meant to be lived. They are not meant to be put in a brand guide and put on a bookshelf and collect dust. And that's one reason your brand is so beautiful and so wonderful, is because you can say that one simple line, but you're living it every single day, and people see that. And that word of mouth is huge too for the people who've been there before. So whether it's your personal brand or your organization's brand, it's not a yucky word. It's not a 4-letter word. A brand is how you show up in the world and do it genuinely.
So beautiful. Please tell everyone where they can find and follow you, where they can get the book, where they can have more fun Becky in their life.
I love the fun Becky part. So Brand Voice, People Plus Data Drive Results is the name of the book. And if you go into Amazon, actually legit, the best way to do it is to Google search Becky Freemal, because I don't sell a single other thing on Amazon right now other than my book. So, and I always tell people Freemal, because people are like, how do you spell that? I'm like, Freemal, a shopping mall where everything is free. If I say it, maybe it'll be true. But yeah, and then I have my own website, beckyfreemal.com, and then LinkedIn. I keep my LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I have a lot of conversations either through the DMs or out in the public space of LinkedIn. But yeah, linkedin.com/Becky Freemal. So
perfect. We will link everything down in the show notes. I have loved this conversation. Thank you so much for your time. I'm really eager to speak to you again, and I cannot wait to get the book.
Oh, I'm so excited. Please do. And I can't wait to take part in one of your French tours. Oh my God.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. As always, any links or notes mentioned can be found at phineaswrighthouse.com in the podcast section of our site, or in the show notes below. And if you haven't connected with me personally, come find me on Instagram at Phineas Wright House
and let me know you listened to this episode. I'd love to get to know you. Thank you for sharing this time with me. I know your days are full, and I'm really grateful that you chose to spend some of your precious time right here. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any of these delightful conversations. I'll see you next week.